The glass in the window of the Silver Spade Saloon shattered as Emma Whitfield ducked beneath the poker table, her heart hammering against her ribs like a frightened bird. Dust and glass rained down around her as the three men who'd been pursuing her since Tucson finally caught up, their boots heavy on the wooden floor of the establishment. It was 1873, and a woman alone in Arizona territory might as well have been wearing a target on her back. Come out, Miss Whitfield," called the gravelly voice of Jasper Tate, the leader of the bounty hunters. "Your father's offering a mighty fine sum to bring you home, and we aim to collect." Emma pressed herself against the wall, the rough wood catching on the fine fabric of her dress, a dress that marked her as someone who didn't belong in a frontier town like Bitter Creek. Her father, a Boston banker with more money than morality, had arranged a marriage for her with a business associate 3 times her age. When she'd fled, he'd sent men after her not to ensure her safety but to protect his investment. "Check under the tables," Jasper ordered his companions. "The little lady's in here somewhere." The patrons of the saloon, mostly miners and cattle drivers, had scattered to the edges of the room, unwilling to get involved in business that wasn't theirs. The barkeep had his shotgun out, but hadn't raised it yet. One woman wasn't worth risking his establishment. Emma saw a pair of dusty boots approaching her hiding spot and knew her time had run out. As rough hands reached under the table and yanked her out by her arm, she found herself surrounded by the 3 men, backed against the bar with nowhere to run. "There you are," Jasper said, his yellow-toothed smile making her stomach turn. "Your daddy's been mighty worried about his little girl." The mockery in his voice was unmistakable. "I'm not going back," Emma declared, chin raised despite her fear. "You can tell my father I'd rather die in the desert." Jasper's smile faded. "That ain't an option, miss. We've been tracking you for 3 weeks, and I ain't about to lose that bounty." He reached for her arm again, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. The batwing doors of the saloon suddenly swung open, letting in a blast of hot, dusty air. Every head turned as the silhouette of a tall man filled the doorway, backlit by the blazing afternoon sun. He stepped inside, spurs jingling softly with each measured step. The newcomer wore a long duster covered in the dust of the trail, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes, and at his hip, a Colt revolver that looked well used but well cared for. His face was partially hidden by several days' worth of stubble, but there was no mistaking the hardness in his blue eyes as they took in the scene before him. His gaze settled on Emma, then shifted to the men surrounding her. Without haste, he moved toward them, each step deliberate. The room had gone quiet except for the soft creak of floorboards beneath his boots. "She's with me," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable edge of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Jasper snorted. "This ain't your business, mister. This lady's father has authorized us to bring her home." The stranger's hand didn't move toward his gun, but something in his posture changed subtly. "I believe the lady doesn't want to go," he said. "And as I said, she's with me." Emma stared at the stranger, confusion mixing with desperate hope. She'd never seen this man before in her life, but at this moment, he represented her only chance. "I don't know who you think you are," Jasper started, his hand drifting toward his own pistol. "The name's Clayton Reed," the stranger replied, "and I'm the man telling you to back away from the lady." A flicker of recognition passed through the saloon at the name. Emma saw several patrons exchange glances, and one man near the door quietly slipped outside. Clayton Reed was clearly someone of reputation, though whether good or bad she couldn't tell. Jasper hesitated, reassessing the situation. "Reed, the one they call Ghost out of Kansas," Clayton didn't confirm or deny, but his silence was answer enough. "This woman's worth $500 to us," Jasper said, lowering his voice. "Maybe we can come to an arrangement." "There's no arrangement to be made," Clayton replied. "The lady stays here. You and your friends ride out." The standoff stretched for several heartbeats. Emma could feel the tension in the room pulling tighter like a bowstring. One of Jasper's companions, a wiry man with a nervous twitch, had his hand hovering near his gun. Clayton noticed too. "I wouldn't," he said softly. "There's 3 of us and 1 of you," Jasper pointed out, though his confidence seemed to be wavering. "Poor odds," Clayton agreed. "For you." The twitchy man made his decision, his hand darting toward his holster. What happened next was almost too fast for Emma to follow. Clayton's hand moved in a blur, and a shot cracked through the saloon. The twitchy man stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, his unfired pistol clattering to the floor. Before the echo of the first shot had faded, Clayton's gun was aimed steadily at Jasper's chest. "Now there's 2 of you," he said. "Want to try again?" Jasper raised his hands slowly, backing away. "This ain't over," he muttered, but the threat sounded hollow even to Emma's ears. "Help your friend," Clayton instructed, nodding toward the wounded man who was slumped against a table. "And leave town. Don't come back." The third bounty hunter helped his wounded companion to his feet, and together the 3 men backed toward the door. "Your father will send more," Jasper called to Emma as they retreated. "Better men than us." After they'd gone, the tension in the room gradually eased. The bartender lowered his shotgun, and the patrons returned to their drinks, though many kept casting curious glances at Clayton and Emma. Clayton holstered his weapon and turned to her. Up close, she could see that his eyes weren't just blue, they were the clear, pale blue of a winter sky, startling against his sun-darkened skin. "Are you hurt, madam?" he asked. "No," Emma replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. You saved my life." He shook his head slightly. "Just bought you some time is all." "Why?" she asked. "You don't know me." A hint of something that might have been a smile touched his lips. "Let's just say I've got no love for men who chase women who don't want to be caught." Emma studied him, trying to reconcile the man who had just drawn and fired with such lethal precision with the one now standing before her, speaking softly and keeping a respectful distance. "What happens now?" she asked. "Jasper was right, my father will send more men." Clayton glanced around the saloon, then back at her. "First, we should move somewhere less public. Those men might decide their wounded pride is worth more than their common sense." He gestured toward a table in the corner, away from the windows and with a clear view of both the front and back entrances. Emma followed him, conscious of the eyes following their movement across the room. "You're not from around here," Clayton observed as they sat down. "Boston," Emma confirmed. "I've been traveling west for 2 months now. Long way from home." "That was the idea," she said, a trace of bitterness creeping into her voice. Clayton signaled to the barkeep, who brought over 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey without being asked. He poured a small amount into each glass, then pushed one toward Emma. "I don't usually," she began. "For the nerves," he explained. "Just a sip." Emma took the glass and followed his advice, wincing as the liquor burned its way down her throat. The heat spread through her chest, and she had to admit it helped steady her slightly. "My name is Emma Whitfield," she offered. "My father is Harrison Whitfield of the Boston Mercantile Bank." Clayton nodded. "Rich man." "Yes." "Rich enough to think he can buy and sell people, including his daughter." Emma's fingers tightened around the glass. "He arranged a marriage for me with one of his business partners, a man old enough to be my grandfather, with a reputation for cruelty toward his previous wives." Understanding dawned in Clayton's eyes. "So you ran." "I had no choice. My father wouldn't listen to reason. He said I was being hysterical, that all women fear marriage until they settle into it." Her laugh was hollow. "As if being sold like cattle is something one simply settles into." "Where were you heading?" Clayton asked. "California." "I have a distant cousin in San Francisco who I hoped might take me in. I've been working my way west, taking odd jobs where I can." Clayton seemed to consider this. "Those men will be back, possibly with reinforcements. And if your father's as determined as you say, there will be others." "I know," Emma admitted, "but I don't know what else to do. I can't go back." Clayton drained his glass and set it down. "I'm heading to a ranch about 2 days' ride from here. My brother owns it." "You'd be safe there while you figure out your next move." Emma stared at him, startled by the offer. Why would you help me? You've already done more than enough. His expression remained unreadable. Let's just say I understand what it's like to run from something that seems inescapable. There was a story there, Emma was certain, but Clayton's face made it clear he wouldn't be sharing it. Besides, he added, those men saw me stand for you. If they come back looking for trouble, they'll be coming for me too. Emma weighed her options. Stay in Bitter Creek and risk Jasper's return, or trust this dangerous stranger who had, for reasons of his own, decided to help her. When would we leave? She asked. Dawn, Clayton replied. We should rest tonight. The trail ahead isn't easy. Emma nodded slowly. All right, Mr. Reed. I accept your offer. Clayton, he corrected. If we're going to be traveling together, might as well use my name. Clayton, Emma repeated, the name feeling strange on her tongue. And I'm Emma, he stood up. I'll arrange for rooms at the boarding house. Best if we're not seen together too much tonight. I'll meet you at the stables at first light. As Clayton walked away, Emma remained at the table, wondering what she had just agreed to. She was trading one unknown for another, putting her trust in a man who could draw and shoot faster than any she'd ever seen. A man they called Ghost. But when she thought of the alternative, being dragged back to Boston and forced into marriage, the decision was clear. Whatever risks lay ahead with Clayton Reed, they were risks she was willing to take. The boarding house was a small, clean establishment run by a widow named Mrs. Holloway. Clayton had secured 2 rooms at opposite ends of the hallway, a precaution that Emma appreciated. After weeks on the road, sleeping in stables and cheap hotels when she could afford them, the simple room with its patchwork quilt and basin of clean water seemed luxurious. Emma washed the dust from her face and hands, then sat on the edge of the bed, considering what few possessions she had managed to bring with her. One dress besides the one she wore, a few personal items, and the remainder of the money she had taken when she fled, not much to show for the daughter of one of Boston's wealthiest men. A soft knock at her door startled her. She approached cautiously. Who is it, Mrs. Holloway, dear? I've brought you some supper and a few things Mr. Reed asked me to deliver. Emma opened the door to find the landlady holding a tray with a steaming bowl of stew and a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. Thank you, Emma said, taking the tray. That's very kind. Mrs. Holloway smiled warmly. Mr. Reed explained you'd had some trouble. Said you'd be leaving at first light. She lowered her voice. You're in good hands, miss. Clayton Reed has a reputation for being hard, but he's a fair man. Known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper when his family first settled out this way. Emma's curiosity was piqued. You've known him a long time, then? Oh, yes. The Reed boys grew up about 20 miles from here. Their pa established one of the first successful ranches in these parts. Mrs. Holloway's eyes grew distant with memory. Clayton was always the quiet one, but sharp as a tack. His brother Connor was the talker, never met a stranger, that one. Different as night and day, those two, but thick as thieves growing up. What happened? Emma asked, sensing there was more to the story. Mrs. Holloway's expression clouded. War happened, dear. The boys went east to fight different sides, if you can believe it. Their pa died while they were gone. When they came back, she shook her head. Well, Connor took over the ranch. Clayton, he took to wandering. Comes through a few times a year to check on his brother, but never stays long. The older woman seemed to catch herself. Listen to me gossiping like an old biddy. You eat that stew while it's hot, dear, and try to get some rest. The ride to the Reed Ranch isn't easy, especially for city folk. After Mrs. Holloway left, Emma unwrapped the brown paper package. Inside was a pair of sturdy riding pants, a simple cotton shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat, clothes far more suitable for the journey ahead than her impractical dress. There was also a small knife in a leather sheath. A note in a firm, no-nonsense hand read, "For the journey, the knife goes in your boot, always." Emma ran her finger over the blade, sharp and practical, like the man who had provided it. Despite her exhaustion, she found herself wondering about Clayton Reed, the quiet boy who had become a gunslinger, the brother who fought against his own kin in the war. What had happened to put that hardness in his eyes? She ate the stew, changed into her nightgown, and tried to sleep, but her mind kept returning to the events of the day. The confrontation in the saloon, the gunshot, the wounded bounty hunter, and Clayton Reed stepping into her life like something out of a dime novel. Dawn came early, the first pale light of day barely visible when Emma dressed in her new clothes and packed her few belongings. The riding pants felt strange after years of corsets and petticoats, but she had to admit they were far more practical. She tucked the knife into her boot as instructed and made her way down to the stables. Clayton was already there, saddling 2 horses, his own impressive buckskin gelding and a smaller, sturdy-looking bay mare. "You ride?" he asked by way of greeting. "Yes," Emma replied. "Though not as well as I should, probably. We had horses in Boston, but it was all very controlled," Clayton nodded. "This is Penny," he said, indicating the bay mare. "She's steady and forgiving. She'll do right by you if you do right by her." Emma approached the horse, letting her sniff her hand before gently stroking her neck. "Hello, Penny," she murmured. "I hope we'll be friends." She thought she saw a flicker of approval in Clayton's eyes before he turned back to securing their provisions. "We'll ride north," he explained. "Stay off the main trails where we can, 2 days if the weather holds." "And if we're followed?" Emma asked. Clayton's hand rested briefly on his holstered Colt. "We deal with it." There was no bravado in his voice, just simple fact, and Emma found that more reassuring than any boasting would have been. They rode out as the sun crested the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty main street of Bitter Creek. A few early risers paused to watch them go, but no one called out or tried to stop them. Within minutes, the town was behind them, and they were alone in the vast, open country. Emma had never experienced anything like the Arizona Territory. Boston, with its crowded streets and tall buildings, had always felt confining, but here, the endless sky and distant mountains created a strange mix of freedom and vulnerability. She could see for miles in every direction, yet somehow felt exposed. Clayton rode slightly ahead, his posture relaxed but vigilant. He didn't speak much, occasionally pointing out landmarks or warning of rough terrain ahead, but otherwise content with the silence. Emma found she didn't mind. After weeks of constant fear, the quiet presence of this capable stranger was comfort enough. They stopped at midday beside a small creek to water the horses and eat a simple meal of jerky and hardtack that Clayton had packed. "Mrs. Holloway seems to think highly of you," Emma ventured as they rested in the shade of a gnarled cottonwood. Clayton's expression remained neutral. "She's known me a long time. She told me about your brother, that you fought on opposite sides in the war." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "People talk too much, I'm sorry," Emma said. "I didn't mean to pry," Clayton sighed, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "It's not a secret. Connor believed in the Union, I rode with the Confederacy, we both had our reasons." "And now?" Emma asked. "Now we don't talk about it," he replied simply. "Some wounds don't need reopening." They fell silent again, but it was a different quality of silence, less a barrier between them and more a shared space where each could exist with their own thoughts. After a short rest, they continued north. The terrain gradually changed, the flat desert giving way to rolling hills dotted with mesquite and cactus. The heat was intense, the sun beating down without mercy, but Clayton set a steady pace that didn't overtax either the horses or Emma's limited experience. As the afternoon wore on, Clayton became increasingly alert, frequently scanning the horizon and occasionally stopping to study the trail behind them. "Is something wrong?" Emma finally asked. "Maybe," he replied. "Dust cloud behind us, could be nothing." Emma turned in her saddle but couldn't see what had caught his attention. "Jasper? Possibly, or just travelers on the same trail." Clayton adjusted his hat. "We'll take a different route just in case." He led them into a narrow canyon, following what appeared to be a game trail rather than any path made by humans. The walls of the canyon provided some relief from the sun, but the trail was rougher, requiring Emma's full attention to navigate safely. "Your father," Clayton said unexpectedly as they picked their way through a rocky section. "Would he really force you to marry against your will?" Emma was surprised by the question after hours of near silence. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "My father believes women are essentially property, first their fathers, then their husbands. My mother had no say in her own marriage, and she—" Emma trailed off, old pain surfacing. "She what?" Clayton prompted, glancing back at her. "She died when I was 12, Emma said quietly. "She was never happy, not that I can remember. Always afraid of displeasing my father, always trying to be perfect. In the end, I think she simply gave up." Clayton was quiet for a moment. "And the man your father chose for you?" "Edgar Pembroke," Emma said, unable to keep the disgust from her voice. "A business associate of my father's. Wealthy, influential, and cruel. His first wife died under mysterious circumstances. His second divorced him at great personal cost. She had to leave the country to escape the scandal. There were rumors about both marriages, rumors of violence. Your father knew this. He said they were merely rumors spread by jealous competitors and hysterical women." Emma's laugh was bitter. "He said Edgar would tame me. That was the word he used, tame. As if I were a wild animal that needed breaking." Clayton's back stiffened. "No one should be tamed against their will," he said, his voice low and hard. They emerged from the canyon into a small valley, green with spring growth and sheltered by cliffs on three sides. A stream cut through the center, widening into a small pool before continuing on its way. "We'll camp here tonight," Clayton decided. "Defensible position, water for the horses, and we're off the main trail." As they made camp, Emma found herself studying Clayton when he wasn't looking. Despite his dangerous reputation, there was something almost gentle in the way he cared for the horses, in how he built their small fire, in the respect with which he treated her. He was a contradiction capable of violence, certainly, but not defined by it. After a meal of beans and coffee, they sat by the fire as darkness fell completely, stars appearing in the vast sky above them. "What will you do?" Clayton asked suddenly. Once you reach California, Emma had asked herself the same question many times. "Find work, I suppose." "I'm educated, I can read and write, keep accounts. My cousin might help me find a position as a teacher or clerk." "Is that what you want, to be a teacher or clerk?" The question caught Emma off guard. No one had ever asked what she wanted before. "I don't know," she admitted. "I never had the luxury of considering what I wanted, only what would allow me to escape." Clayton nodded, poking at the fire with a stick. "Freedom's a fine thing to ride toward," he said, "but it helps to have something else in mind for when you get there." "What about you?" Emma asked. "What are you riding toward, Clayton Reed?" He was quiet for so long that Emma thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was soft, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "Peace, maybe, understanding, something I lost a long time ago, during the war." His eyes, reflecting the firelight, met hers across the flames. "Before, during, after, take your pick." There was no self-pity in his voice, just a simple acknowledgement of loss. Emma found herself wanting to know more, to understand what had shaped this complex man, but she respected his privacy too much to press further. "We should sleep," Clayton said, changing the subject. "I'll take first watch. You can have the bedroll." Emma started to protest, but Clayton shook his head. "You need the rest more than I do. Been on the trail a lot longer than you. I'm used to it." Recognizing the logic in his argument, Emma accepted the bedroll. As she settled in, she watched Clayton move to sit with his back against a boulder, his rifle across his knees, silhouetted against the starlit sky. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for today, but for everything." Clayton didn't turn, but she saw him nod slightly. "Sleep, Emma. Tomorrow will come early enough." Despite her exhaustion, Emma found it difficult to fall asleep. Every sound of the desert night startled her, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustle of some small creature in the brush, the soft nickering of the horses. But whenever she opened her eyes, Clayton was there. a steady presence in the darkness, and eventually she drifted into sleep. She dreamed of Boston, of her father's house with its polished wood and heavy drapes, of rooms that felt like beautiful prisons. In the dream, she was running through endless corridors, trying to find a way out, while behind her, she could hear her father's voice calling her name, getting closer and closer. Emma woke with a start, her heart pounding. The fire had burned down to embers and the night was cold. Clayton was no longer sitting against the boulder. For a moment, panic seized her. Had he abandoned her? But then she saw him standing at the edge of their camp, looking out into the darkness. "Clayton," she called softly. He turned, his face unreadable in the dim light. "Someone's out there," he said quietly. "Get your things together, quickly and quietly." Emma's hands trembled as she rolled up the bedroll and gathered her few possessions. Clayton moved silently around the camp, saddling the horses with practiced efficiency. "How many?" she whispered. "At least 3, he replied. "Maybe more, Jasper," Clayton nodded grimly. Recognized his voice, fear coiled in Emma's stomach. "What do? We leave. Now, stay close to me, and if I tell you to run, you ride as hard as you can toward the North Star. Don't stop, don't look back." The ranch is about a day's ride that direction. Emma nodded, though the thought of being separated from Clayton filled her with dread. He helped her mount Penny, then swung up onto his own horse. "Stay in my tracks," he instructed, "and keep quiet." They moved away from the camp, Clayton leading them along the base of the cliff, staying in the deepest shadows. Emma's every sense was heightened. The sound of the horses' hooves seemed impossibly loud to her ears, the darkness both concealing and threatening. They had gone perhaps half a mile when a shot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off the cliff face above their heads. "Ride," Clayton shouted, spurring his horse forward. Emma dug her heels into Penny's sides, and the mare leaped forward, following Clayton's buckskin into a narrow gap between the cliffs. Behind them, she could hear shouts and more gunfire. The trail climbed steeply, winding up the side of the cliff. Emma clung to the saddle, trusting Penny to follow Clayton's horse. The night air whipped past her face, carrying the scent of dust and sage and gunpowder. At the top of the ridge, Clayton suddenly pulled up short. Emma reined in beside him, gasping for breath. "What's wrong?" she asked. In answer, Clayton pointed ahead. In the moonlight, Emma could see that the trail ended abruptly at a deep ravine, too wide to jump. "We're trapped," she realized, her voice tight with fear. Clayton dismounted quickly. "Not yet, we're not." He led his horse to a cluster of boulders. "Get down." "Bring Penny over here." Emma obeyed, her legs shaky as she dismounted. Clayton positioned the horses behind the boulders, then drew his rifle from its scabbard. "Stay with the horses," he told her. "Keep low." "What are you going to do?" Clayton checked his ammunition. "Even the odds a little." Before she could protest, he had slipped away, moving from shadow to shadow until he disappeared from view. Emma crouched beside the horses, her hand on the knife in her boot, listening to the sounds of pursuit growing closer. Minutes passed like hours. Emma could hear men's voices now, approaching cautiously up the trail. She counted at least 3 distinct voices: Jasper's gravelly drawl, the nervous chatter of the man Clayton had wounded, and a deeper voice she didn't recognize. A shot cracked through the night, followed immediately by a cry of pain. Another shot from a different position, a third. The bounty hunters returned fire, shooting blindly into the darkness. "Reed's out there," she heard Jasper shout. "He's trying to pick us off. I'm hit." The deep voice responded. "The bastard shot me in the leg. Where is he?" "I don't know. He's moving around." Emma realized what Clayton was doing, using the darkness and his knowledge of the terrain to make them think they were facing more than one man. It was a dangerous game, but it was buying them time. More shots were exchanged. Emma flinched at each one, terrified that Clayton might be hit. Then suddenly there was silence. "Reed," Jasper's voice called out. "We just want the girl. Give her up and you can ride away." No response. "We've got you cornered. There's nowhere to go." The silence stretched, broken only by the wind and the nervous snorting of the horses. "Check behind those rocks," Jasper ordered. "The horses might be there." Emma's heart nearly stopped. They were coming for her. She drew the knife, knowing it would be useless against guns but unwilling to be taken without a fight. A figure appeared suddenly beside her, and Emma nearly cried out before realizing it was Clayton. He put a finger to his lips, then whispered, "When I start shooting, mount up and ride back the way we came. There's only 2 of them now, and they're both on the trail." "What about you?" Emma whispered back. "I'll be right behind you." He squeezed her arm briefly. "Trust me." Before she could respond, Clayton had moved to the edge of the boulders, rifle raised. He fired 3 rapid shots, and chaos erupted on the trail. Emma didn't hesitate. She swung up onto Penny's back, gathered the reins, and urged the mare out from behind the boulders. She could see 2 figures on the trail, both taking cover as Clayton continued to fire from his position. She rode straight at them, her heart in her throat. One of the men, the twitchy one with the wounded shoulder, stepped into her path, raising his pistol. A shot rang out and the man crumpled. Clayton's buckskin thundered past Emma and she heard him shout, "Keep riding." She bent low over Penny's neck, giving the mare her head. Behind her, she heard more gunfire, but she didn't look back, focusing only on staying in the saddle as they galloped down the treacherous trail. At the bottom, she finally risked a glance back. Clayton was right behind her, his hat gone, his face grim in the moonlight. Beyond him, she could see no sign of pursuit. "Are they?" She began as Clayton drew alongside her. "One's dead," he said flatly. "Jasper took a bullet but was still moving. He won't follow us tonight." They rode hard for another hour, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the ravine. When they finally stopped to rest the horses, Emma was trembling with exhaustion and fading adrenaline. "You killed a man," she said, the reality of it sinking in. "Because of me." Clayton unsaddled the horses, his movements efficient despite his obvious fatigue. "I killed a man who was trying to kill us," he corrected. "There's a difference." "But if I hadn't been there, if you hadn't been there, they'd have been hunting someone else." Clayton looked at her directly. "Men like that, they make their choices, so do we. I made mine when I walked into that saloon yesterday." The simple way he said it, as if standing up for a stranger against armed men, was the most natural thing in the world, left Emma speechless. "We'll rest here for a few hours," Clayton continued, spreading his bedroll on the ground. "Then ride at first light. We should reach the ranch by nightfall tomorrow." "Will Jasper follow?" Emma asked. Clayton considered this. "Maybe, depends how bad he's hit, but he's persistent, I'll give him that." "And what happens when we reach your brother's ranch? You'll be safe there," Clayton assured her. "Connor's got enough men and guns to discourage most trouble. We can figure out your next move once you've had some proper rest." Emma nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at her. The plan had always been California, her cousin, a new life far from her father's reach. Now, standing in the middle of the Arizona wilderness with a gunslinger who had killed for her, nothing seemed certain anymore. "Try to sleep," Clayton said, his voice gentler than she had heard it before. "I'll wake you at dawn." This time, Clayton insisted she take the first rest while he kept watch. Despite her protests that she was too keyed up to sleep, exhaustion soon claimed her and she fell into a dreamless slumber. When Clayton woke her, the eastern sky was just beginning to lighten. They ate a cold breakfast, saddled the horses, and set out once more. The landscape changed as they rode north, becoming greener and more varied. They crossed several small streams, passed through groves of cottonwood and pine, and traversed rolling hills covered in grass that rippled like water in the breeze. Clayton was more talkative than he had been the previous day, pointing out landmarks and sharing bits of knowledge about the territory. Emma sensed he was trying to keep her mind off the events of the night, and she was grateful for the distraction. "How long have you been away from your brother's ranch?" she asked during a brief stop to rest the horses. "Been on the trail about 4 months this time," Clayton replied. "Went down to the border country on some business." "What kind of business?" A shadow crossed his face. "The kind that pays." Emma decided not to press further. Whatever Clayton did when he wasn't rescuing women in saloons, it clearly wasn't something he was eager to discuss. "And your brother?" she asked instead. "What is he like? At this, Clayton's expression softened slightly. Connor's a good man. Stubborn as a mule and talks twice as much, but his heart's in the right place. Built that ranch from almost nothing after the war, married a local girl, Maria. They've got 3 children now. You're fond of them, Emma observed. They're family, Clayton said simply, as if that explained everything. Perhaps for him it did. They rode on. As the day progressed, Emma found herself watching Clayton more and more, the set of his shoulders, the way he sat easy in the saddle, the careful attention he paid to their surroundings. Despite the danger they had faced, despite the uncertainty ahead, she felt safe in his company in a way she hadn't felt in years. It was a dangerous feeling, she knew. Clayton Reed was not a man to build dreams around. He lived by his gun, moved like a shadow through a violent world. Yet there was an honor to him, a decency that all his hardness couldn't hide. By late afternoon, they had reached a river that cut through a broad, green valley. Cattle grazed on the surrounding hillsides, and in the distance, Emma could make out buildings, a large main house, barns, bunkhouses, corrals. Reed Ranch, Clayton announced, a note of pride in his voice despite his usual reserve. They rode down into the valley, following a well-maintained road that led to the ranch house. As they approached, a man on horseback rode out to meet them. He was tall like Clayton, but broader through the shoulders, with a shock of dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore no gun that Emma could see. "Clayton," the man called, his face breaking into a wide smile. "You're back early. Maria was just saying yesterday that we probably wouldn't see you until—" He broke off as he noticed Emma. "And you've brought company." "Connor," Clayton greeted his brother with a nod. "This is Miss Emma Whitfield. She's in some trouble and needs a safe place for a while." Connor Reed studied Emma with frank curiosity. "Any friend of Clay's is welcome here, Miss Whitfield." He turned back to his brother. "Though I have to say, brother, this is a first. You usually ride in alone and ride out the same way." There was a question in his words that Clayton ignored. "We had some trouble on the trail. Bounty hunters might still be following." Connor's expression turned serious. "How many?" "Started with 3. Down to at least 1 now, maybe none." Connor whistled softly. "You can tell me the whole story inside. Maria's going to be beside herself when she sees you've actually brought a guest home." He led them to the ranch house, a sprawling structure built of timber and stone. It was larger and more impressive than Emma had expected, speaking to the success of Connor's efforts since the war. As they dismounted, the front door opened, and a woman hurried out, petite, with dark hair and eyes, her face lighting up at the sight of Clayton. "Clay," she exclaimed, embracing him warmly. "We didn't expect you for months." Clayton returned the embrace somewhat awkwardly. "Hello, Maria. Hope we're not intruding. Don't be ridiculous." Maria stepped back and noticed Emma for the first time. "Oh, and who is this?" "Emma Whitfield," Clayton introduced her. "She needs a place to stay for a while." Maria's eyes widened slightly, but her smile never faltered. "Of course, any friend of Clay's is family here. Come inside, both of you. You look exhausted and dinner is almost ready." Emma found herself ushered into a warm, comfortable home that balanced frontier practicality with unexpected touches of elegance. The main room was dominated by a large stone fireplace, its walls decorated with a mix of local crafts and what appeared to be family heirlooms. 3 children, 2 boys around 10 and 8, and a girl of about 6 came running at the sound of their uncle's voice. They swarmed around Clayton, who transformed before Emma's eyes, a genuine smile breaking through his usual reserve as he greeted each child by name, producing small gifts from his saddlebags. "Michael, Ethan, Isabella, this is Miss Whitfield," Clayton introduced, once the initial excitement had calmed. "She's going to be staying with us for a while." The children regarded Emma with undisguised curiosity before their mother shooed them away to wash up for dinner. "You both should clean up as well," Maria suggested. "I'll show you to your rooms. Dinner will be on the table in half an hour." Emma was led to a small but comfortable bedroom with a real bed, the first she'd seen in weeks. Maria provided her with a basin of warm water, clean towels, and the loan of a simple dress. "Clay doesn't usually bring visitors," Maria remarked as she laid out the dress. "In fact, I can't recall him ever bringing anyone to the ranch before." There was a gentle question in her voice, and Emma felt compelled to explain. "He saved my life," she said simply. "I was being pursued by men my father hired to bring me back to Boston for an arranged marriage. Clayton intervened and offered me safe passage here." Maria nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like Clay, always fighting other people's battles." She smiled warmly. "Well, you're safe here, Emma, and welcome, for as long as you need." Dinner was a lively affair, so different from the silent, formal meals of Emma's childhood that she hardly knew how to participate. Connor was as talkative as Clayton was quiet, keeping up a steady stream of ranch news and local gossip. The children chattered about their days, interrupted occasionally by gentle corrections from their mother. Clayton said little but seemed content, more relaxed than Emma had seen him. After the meal, when the children had been put to bed, the adults gathered in the main room. Connor poured whiskey for himself and Clayton and offered wine to Maria and Emma, which Emma declined. "Now," Connor said, settling into his chair, "suppose you tell me what kind of trouble follows you this time, brother." Clayton recounted their journey briefly, leaving out some of the more violent details but making it clear that Jasper and his men had been persistent and dangerous. "Boston banker's daughter, huh?" Connor mused, looking at Emma with new interest. "That explains a lot. Your father must be offering quite a reward to have them track you this far." $500, Emma confirmed. "A small fortune for men like Jasper." "And a pittance compared to what your father would gain from the marriage alliance," Maria observed shrewdly. Emma nodded. "Exactly." "Well, you're welcome to stay as long as you need," Connor assured her, "though I'd suggest sending word to your cousin in San Francisco. Let her know you're safe, see if she's still willing to take you in." "That's very generous of you," Emma said, touched by the easy acceptance of these strangers. "It's what family does," Maria said simply. Emma caught Clayton watching her, his expression unreadable in the firelight. When their eyes met, he didn't look away, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement, perhaps, of the strange circumstances that had brought them together. Later, as Emma prepared for bed in her borrowed room, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Clayton standing there, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway. "Just wanted to make sure you're settled," he said, remaining in the doorway. "Yes, thank you," Emma replied. "Your family is very kind," Clayton nodded. "They're good people." A pause stretched between them, filled with things unsaid. "Will you be staying?" Emma finally asked. "At the ranch, I mean." Clayton's gaze shifted past her into the middle distance. "For a while, need to make sure Jasper doesn't cause more trouble." And then he looked at her then, really looked at her, and Emma felt as if he could see straight through to her soul. "I don't know," he admitted. "Never been good at staying in one place for long." Emma wanted to ask why, wanted to understand what drove this man who had risked his life for her without hesitation yet couldn't seem to find peace in his own home. But the questions felt too personal, too intrusive. "Thank you," she said instead. "For everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't walked into that saloon." "You'd have found another way," Clayton said with unexpected certainty. "You're stronger than you think, Emma Whitfield." Before she could respond to that, he bid her good night and walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway, watching his retreating figure and wondering if he might be right. The next days at Reed Ranch fell into a comfortable routine. Emma, accustomed to idleness among Boston's elite, found satisfaction in making herself useful. She helped Maria with household tasks, spent time with the children, and even learned to milk cows under the amused guidance of one of the ranch hands. Clayton divided his time between riding the boundaries of the ranch, consulting with Connor on various business matters, and teaching his nephews to track and shoot. Emma saw him at meals and occasionally in the evenings, but he seemed to be keeping a deliberate distance. A week after their arrival, Connor returned from town with supplies and news. "Sent your letter to your cousin in San Francisco," he told Emma over dinner. "Should reach her in a couple of weeks, depending on the mail." "Thank you," Emma said, feeling a strange mix of relief and reluctance. The letter was a necessary step toward her planned future, yet the prospect of leaving Reed Ranch in Clayton filled her with an unexpected sadness. "Also heard some interesting gossip in town," Connor continued. "Seems a bounty hunter named Jasper Tate is nursing a bullet wound over in Silver Springs. Been telling anyone who'll listen about how the ghost shot him while he was just doing his job bringing in a runaway girl." Clayton's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened slightly around his fork. "He's still planning to collect that bounty," Connor shrugged. "Hard to say. Bullet took him in the shoulder. Your work, I assume. He's laid up at the doctor's, but word is he's sent a telegram east." "To my father," Emma realized, her stomach clenching with dread. "Most likely," Connor agreed. "Which means your father now knows exactly where to focus his search." "He'll send more men," Clayton said, his voice flat. "Probably," Connor agreed. "But they'll have to deal with us, not just you two on the trail." Maria reached across the table to squeeze Emma's hand. "Don't worry. You're safe here." Emma tried to smile, but fear had reignited inside her. If her father knew she was in Arizona territory, he would spare no expense to retrieve her. The thought of bringing danger to this family that had welcomed her so warmly was unbearable. After dinner, Emma slipped outside, needing air and space to think. The night was cool, the sky ablaze with stars. She walked to the corral fence and leaned against it, gazing out at the shadowy forms of horses moving in the darkness. She sensed rather than heard Clayton approach, his footsteps nearly silent on the packed earth. "Planning your escape?" he asked, coming to stand beside her at the fence. Emma glanced at him, startled. "How did you know?" Clayton's mouth curved in a hint of a smile. "Recognized the look. Seen it in the mirror often enough." "I can't stay," Emma said after a moment. "I've brought enough trouble to your family already. They've weathered worse." "That doesn't make it right." Emma turned to face him. "I need to move on, Clayton. Get to California before my father's men catch up." Clayton studied her face in the moonlight. "Alone?" The question hung between them, laden with implications. "I don't know," Emma admitted. "I've been alone since I left Boston. I'm not sure I know how to be anything else." Clayton was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, more hesitant than she had ever heard it. "I could take you," he offered. "To San Francisco. Make sure you get there safely." Emma's heart quickened. "Why would you do that?" "Maybe I'm headed that way anyway." "Are you?" Clayton looked away, out toward the distant mountains. "Could be." Emma recognized the evasion but didn't press. "What about your family, your brother?" "Connor's got things well in hand here, has for years." There was no bitterness in Clayton's voice, just simple acknowledgement. "When would we leave?" Emma asked, the possibility taking shape in her mind. "Soon. Before Jasper recovers enough to cause more trouble, before your father's new men arrive." Clayton turned back to her. "But only if it's what you want." In that moment, looking into Clayton Reed's eyes, Emma realized that what she wanted had changed. California, her cousin, the teaching position, they were still her destination, but no longer her only desire. Somewhere along the dusty trail from Bitter Creek, somewhere between gunshots in the darkness and quiet conversations by firelight, Clayton Reed had become important to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. "Yes," she said softly. "It's what I want." Clayton nodded once, decision made. "I'll speak to Connor tomorrow. We can be ready to leave in a few days." As he turned to go, Emma caught his arm. "Clayton." He paused, looking down at her hand on his sleeve, then at her face. "Thank you." He covered her hand with his own briefly, a gesture so gentle it made her throat tight with emotion. "Get some rest, Emma. We've got a long road ahead." The next morning, Clayton spoke with Connor privately while Emma helped Maria with the laundry. She couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see them through the window. Clayton talking more than she had ever seen him do. Connor listening with a serious expression, before finally nodding and clapping his brother on the shoulder. Later, Connor sought Emma out as she was hanging sheets to dry. "So," he said without preamble, "my brother tells me he's escorting you to California." Emma nodded, suddenly nervous under Connor's scrutiny. "He offered and I accepted. I don't want to bring more trouble to your door." Connor leaned against the porch railing, studying her. "You know, Clayton's been wandering since the war ended. More than 10 years now, comes home for a few weeks, then disappears for months. Never brings anyone with him, never tells us much about where he goes or what he does." Emma wasn't sure how to respond, so she remained silent. "He's a good man," Connor continued. "Better than he thinks he is. The war, it changed him, made him believe he didn't deserve peace, didn't deserve a home." "Why are you telling me this?" Emma asked quietly. Connor's gaze was direct, penetrating. "Because in all these years, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching." Heat rushed to Emma's cheeks. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Connor assured her. "Just be careful with him. Clayton spent a long time building walls around himself if someone were to get past those walls." He left the sentence unfinished. "I would never hurt him," Emma said, the words coming straight from her heart. Connor smiled then, the family resemblance to Clayton's suddenly striking. "I believe you. Just thought you should know what you're getting into with my brother." That evening, preparations for their journey began in earnest. Maria helped Emma mend and pack her limited wardrobe, adding a few items of her own that she insisted Emma take. Connor provided maps and advice about the route to California, marking safe places to stop and areas to avoid. Clayton was mostly absent, riding into town for supplies and speaking with the ranch hands about increased vigilance in his absence. When he was at the ranch, he was quieter than usual, preoccupied with his thoughts. 2 days later, everything was ready. They would leave at dawn the next morning, taking a northern route through Nevada before turning west to California. Connor had arranged for a telegram to be sent to Emma's cousin from the next major town, informing her of their expected arrival. Their last night at the ranch, after the children had been put to bed with promises of souvenirs from San Francisco, Connor broke out a bottle of good whiskey. "To safe journeys," he toasted, raising his glass. They drank, and conversation flowed easily among the 4 adults, touching on everything from ranch business to childhood memories of the Reed brothers. "Remember that time Pa caught you trying to break that wild Mustang?" Connor asked, grinning at Clayton. "You couldn't have been more than 12. Clayton actually smiled at the memory. "Nearly broke my neck instead. Pa tanned my hide good for that one." "And deserved it," Connor laughed, "though it didn't stop you from trying again a week later." "Always was stubborn," Clayton acknowledged. "Still is," Maria said fondly. "Some things never change." As the evening wore on, Emma found herself treasuring these glimpses of the man Clayton had been before the war, before whatever hardships had shaped him into the quiet gunslinger who had walked into her life. She could see traces of that boy in his rare smiles, in the way he relaxed among his family. When it was time to retire, Connor embraced his brother fiercely, whispering something in his ear that made Clayton nod solemnly. Maria hugged them both, extracting promises to write and to stay safe. At dawn, they set out. The goodbye was emotional, the children clinging to their uncle, Maria wiping away tears, Connor maintaining a brave face but clearly affected. Emma, who had known these people for just over a week, found herself moved nearly to tears by their genuine affection. "Remember," Connor said as they mounted their horses, "this is your home too, Emma. Whatever happens in California, you're always welcome here." "Thank you," Emma replied, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything." They rode north, away from Reed Ranch, the rising sun at their backs. Clayton was quiet, and Emma respected his silence, understanding that leaving family was never easy, even for a man accustomed to wandering. By midday, his mood had lightened somewhat, and they talked casually as they rode about the landscape, about the towns ahead, about anything except the uncertainty of their future. That night they camped beside a small stream. As Emma prepared their simple meal, Clayton tended the horses, moving with the easy efficiency she had come to admire. "Your brother and his wife are wonderful people," she remarked as they ate. Clayton nodded. "Always have been." Even when we were on opposite sides of the war, Connor never stopped writing, never stopped considering me his brother. "That must have meant a lot," Emma said softly, "more than I could say at the time." Clayton poked at the fire with a stick. "I wasn't in a place to hear it then. And now." He was quiet for a moment. "Now I understand better what he was trying to tell me, that some bonds can't be broken, even when everything else falls apart." Emma thought about her own family, her distant father, her cowed, unhappy mother, the formal dinners and cold politeness that had defined her childhood. She had never known the kind of unconditional love she had witnessed at Reed Ranch. "You're fortunate," she said, "to have that." Clayton looked at her across the fire, his eyes reflecting the flames. "What about your family? Beyond your father, I mean, do you have siblings?" Emma shook her head. "No, my mother had several miscarriages after I was born. Each one seemed to diminish her somehow. By the time I was 10, she was like a ghost in our home. My father buried himself in his business. I was raised mostly by governesses." "Sounds lonely," Clayton observed. "It was," Emma admitted. "I used to create imaginary friends, entire families in my mind. My father caught me talking to them once. He fired the governess and hired a stricter one who was instructed to correct my fanciful tendencies." Clayton's expression darkened. "Your father sounds like a hard man." "He is," Emma agreed. "But in his own way, I think he believed he was doing what was best for me, preparing me for the world as he saw it, a place where sentiment was weakness and practicality was strength." "Is that how you see the world?" Clayton asked. Emma considered the question seriously. "I used to think I had to choose to be either practical or sentimental, hard or soft, but these past weeks—" She looked up at Clayton. "I've seen strength in kindness, practicality in doing what's right rather than what's expedient. I've seen a man who can be both hard and gentle." Clayton held her gaze for a long moment before looking away, and Emma wondered if she had said too much, revealed too much of her growing feelings. "We should get some rest," he said finally. "Long ride tomorrow." They traveled for 5 more days, settling into a comfortable routine. During the day, they rode side by side when the trail allowed, talking more freely than they had before. Emma told Clayton about her education, her love of books, her dreams of perhaps someday becoming a writer. Clayton shared stories of his travels, the people he had met, the places he had seen, carefully edited to avoid the darker aspects of his wandering life. At night, they took turns keeping watch, though Clayton insisted on taking the longer shifts, claiming he needed less sleep. Emma noticed, however, that he looked increasingly tired as the days passed, and she wondered if nightmares were disturbing what little rest he did get. On the 6th day, they reached a small settlement called Pinecrest, perched on the edge of the Sierra Nevada mountains. It was larger than Bitter Creek, but still small by Eastern standards, a main street lined with businesses, a church, a school, and scattered houses. "We'll stop here for a day or two," Clayton decided. "Rest the horses, get supplies for the mountain crossing, send that telegram to your cousin." They secured rooms at the town's only hotel, a modest but clean establishment run by a no-nonsense widow named Mrs. Fletcher. After weeks on the trail, the simple luxury of a real bed and private bath seemed almost decadent to Emma. Clean and refreshed, wearing her one good dress, now somewhat trail-worn but still presentable, Emma met Clayton for dinner in the hotel's small dining room. He too had cleaned up, shaved his trail beard, and put on a fresh shirt. The transformation was striking without the dust and stubble. His features were more refined than rugged, his blue eyes more vivid against his sun-darkened skin. "You look different," Emma said as he held her chair for her. A hint of self-consciousness crossed his face as he took his own seat. "Good different or bad different, just different," she said with a smile. "Though I will say cleanliness becomes you, Mr. Reed. He actually smiled at that, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and took years off his face. Likewise, Miss Whitfield. They ordered dinner real food, not trail rations, and for the first time since they'd met, they shared a meal in civilization, sitting across from each other at a proper table like any normal couple. The thought brought Emma up short. They weren't a couple. Clayton was her protector, her guide, perhaps her friend, but nothing more. Yet sitting across from him in the warm light of the dining room, watching him relax and even joke with the waitress, Emma could imagine a different reality, one where they had met under normal circumstances, where they could court properly, where the future held possibilities beyond an uncertain goodbye in San Francisco. After dinner, they stepped outside to enjoy the cool evening air. The main street was quiet, most businesses closed for the night, a few patrons still visible through the windows of the saloon down the way. "I sent the telegram while you were resting," Clayton told her as they walked. "Should reach your cousin in a day or two." "Thank you," Emma said, though the reminder of their journey's end brought with it a pang of regret. "How long until we reach San Francisco?" 4, maybe 5 days if the weather holds in the mountains." Clayton glanced at the sky where stars were beginning to appear. "We're making good time." Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. 5 days, less than a week until they reached their destination and parted ways. They walked in silence for a time, eventually stopping at the edge of town where the street gave way to open country. The mountains loomed ahead, dark against the night sky, their peaks still capped with snow despite the summer warmth. "What will you do?" Emma asked suddenly. "After San Francisco, I mean." Clayton was quiet for so long that Emma thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was contemplative. "Not sure," he admitted. "Head back east maybe, or north to Oregon, haven't decided yet." "Will you go home, to the ranch?" he shrugged. "Eventually." "Always do." "But you never stay," Emma observed softly. Clayton looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "Never had a reason to," he said simply. The words hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Emma felt her heart racing, aware that they were standing at a crossroads that had nothing to do with geography. "Clayton," she began, not sure what she was going to say but needing to say something. Before she could continue, a voice called out from behind them. "Well, well. Look who we have here." They turned to find Jasper Tate standing in the middle of the street, his right arm in a sling, his left hand resting on his holstered pistol. Behind him stood 2 men Emma didn't recognize, hard-faced strangers with the look of hired guns. "Tate," Clayton acknowledged coldly, stepping slightly in front of Emma. Shoulder heeling up, Jasper's face twisted with hatred. "No thanks to you, Reed. You cost me a partner and a lot of pain." "You brought it on yourself," Clayton replied evenly, "just like you're doing now." Jasper smiled, an ugly expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Difference is, this time I came prepared," he nodded to his companions. "These boys are professionals, fast, accurate, and they don't particularly care who they shoot, still after the bounty." Clayton asked, his posture relaxed but alert. "That," Jasper agreed, and a bit of personal satisfaction. "You embarrass me, Reed." "Nobody does that," and walks away. Emma felt fear rising in her throat, but Clayton remained calm beside her. "Walk away, Tate," he advised. "You're injured, and even with your friends, this won't end well for you," Jasper laughed. "Big talk for a man about to die." His expression hardened. "Hand over the girl, Reed. Maybe I'll let you live." "Not going to happen," Clayton said quietly. The street had emptied, the few people who had been outside having quickly disappeared at the first sign of trouble. In the silence, Emma could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. "Have it your way," Jasper said, his hand tightening on his gun. What happened next was a blur. Jasper and his men drew, but Clayton was faster, impossibly fast. His first shot took one of the hired guns in the chest. His second caught the other in the shoulder, spinning him around. Before Jasper could get off a shot with his uninjured arm, Clayton's third bullet found its mark, and Jasper Tate crumpled to the ground. The entire exchange had taken less than 5 seconds. Clayton moved quickly, kicking away the fallen men's weapons, checking each to confirm they were no longer threats. 2 were dead Jasper and one of his companions. The third was alive but seriously wounded. By now, people were emerging from buildings, drawn by the gunshots. The town marshal arrived, took in the scene, and approached Clayton cautiously. "What happened here?" he demanded. Clayton explained briefly, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. Several witnesses from the saloon confirmed his account that Jasper and his men had confronted them, drawn first, and given Clayton no choice but to defend himself and Emma. The marshal, a pragmatic man familiar with frontier justice, nodded his understanding. Self-defense, clear as day. "Still, there'll need to be an inquest. You'll have to stay in town until the circuit judge arrives." Clayton's jaw tightened. "How long?" 3 days, maybe 4, the marshal replied. "Just a formality given the witnesses, but the law's the law." Clayton nodded his acceptance, though Emma could see the tension in his shoulders. "The wounded man needs a doctor," he said, gesturing to Jasper's surviving companion. As the town physician was summoned and the bodies removed, Clayton led Emma back toward the hotel, his hand gentle but firm on her elbow. "Are you all right?" he asked once they were away from the crowd. Emma nodded, though she was trembling slightly from the aftermath of fear and adrenaline. "Yes, I keep bringing violence into your life." Clayton stopped, turning to face her. "Emma, this isn't your fault. Men like Jasper make their own choices. But if you hadn't what? Refused to be sold into marriage, chosen freedom over security." Clayton's voice was intense, his eyes holding hers. "You have nothing to apologize for." Emma looked up at him, this man who had now killed for her twice without hesitation or apparent remorse. Not out of bloodlust or anger, but from a deeply rooted sense of right and wrong that allowed no compromise. "How can you do it?" she asked softly. "Take a life so efficiently." Clayton's expression grew distant. "The war taught me how, the years since taught me when." He looked down at his hands, strong, capable hands that could be so gentle with a horse or a child, yet so deadly when required. "I don't take any pleasure in it." "I know," Emma said, and she did. Whatever Clayton Reed was, he was not a man who killed for sport or glory. They reached the hotel, pausing at the foot of the stairs that would lead to their separate rooms. "The delay," Emma said. "Will it be a problem?" Clayton shook his head. "Just means we'll reach San Francisco a few days later than planned." The reminder of their destination brought back the conversation that had been interrupted by Jasper's arrival, the moment when something had seemed about to change between them. "Clayton," Emma began, not sure how to recapture that moment or if she even should. He looked at her questioningly and she lost her nerve. "Nothing, just thank you again." A shadow of disappointment crossed his face, or perhaps she imagined it. "Get some rest," he said. "It's been a long day." Emma nodded and headed up the stairs, feeling as if she had somehow failed a test she hadn't known she was taking. The next 3 days in Pinecrest passed slowly. The town buzzed with talk of the shootout, Clayton Reed's lightning-fast draw, the bounty hunters who had pursued a Boston banker's daughter across half the country, the mystery of why a notorious gunslinger was escorting a well-bred Eastern lady to San Francisco. Emma found herself the object of intense curiosity, especially from the town's female residents. Mrs. Fletcher, the hotel proprietor, took it upon herself to act as a buffer, fielding questions and discouraging the most persistent gossips. "Pay them no mind," she advised Emma on the second day. "Small towns run on talk, and yours is the most interesting story to come through Pinecrest in months." "What are they saying?" Emma asked, both dreading and needing to know. Mrs. Fletcher snorted. "What aren't they saying? Some think you're eloping, others think you're running from the law. The more romantic souls have decided Mr. Reed rescued you from bandits and you've fallen madly in love with him." Emma felt heat rising to her cheeks. "That's ridiculous." Mrs. Fletcher gave her a knowing look. "Is it? I've seen the way you look at him when you think no one's watching." Before Emma could formulate a response, the older woman patted her hand. Don't worry, dear, your business is your own, though if I might offer some unsolicited advice. She didn't wait for permission. That man looks at you the same way, and men like Clayton Reed don't come along every day. The observation stayed with Emma as she went about her day, running errands in the small town, always aware of Clayton's presence nearby. He had taken to maintaining a respectful distance in public, conscious of her reputation, but she never felt unprotected. That evening, a telegram arrived from San Francisco. Emma's cousin's response. Clayton brought it to her as she sat reading in the hotel's small parlor. "From your cousin," he said, handing her the folded paper. Emma opened it with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The message was brief but clear. "Emma, stop, relieved to hear you are safe. Stop, welcome to stay with US. Stop, husband has teaching position arranged. Stop, arriving next week. Perfect timing. Stop, looking forward to seeing you. Stop, Margaret." "Good news?" Clayton asked, watching her face. "Yes," Emma replied, though her feelings were more complex than the words suggested. "My cousin welcomes me, and her husband has already arranged a teaching position." "That's fortunate," Clayton observed, his expression carefully neutral. "Yes," Emma agreed, "very fortunate." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with unspoken thoughts and feelings. Emma folded the telegram carefully, smoothing its creases with fingers that weren't quite steady. "The circuit judge arrives tomorrow," Clayton said finally. "If all goes as expected, we can leave the following morning." Emma nodded. "Back on the trail again." "For a few more days," Clayton agreed, and there was something in his voice, a note of regret or resignation that made Emma look up sharply. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the careful distance they had maintained in Pinecrest collapsed. Emma saw in Clayton's gaze everything he hadn't said: his growing feelings for her, his uncertainty about their future, his fear of what awaited them in San Francisco. "Clayton," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. The parlor door opened, and Mrs. Fletcher entered with a tea tray, breaking the moment. Clayton stood abruptly. "I should check on the horses," he said. "Make sure they're ready for the mountain crossing." Before Emma could respond, he was gone, leaving her with the echo of what might have been said if they had only had a few more seconds alone. The circuit judge arrived the next day, as promised, a gruff, practical man who had seen too much frontier justice to be shocked by 3 more bodies. The inquest was brief and straightforward. Witnesses testified that Jasper and his men had clearly been the aggressors, that Clayton had acted in self-defense, and that the shootout had been fair if one-sided. "No charges to answer," the judge concluded after less than an hour of testimony. "Mr. Reed, you're free to go, though I might suggest finding a different line of work. Your reputation tends to attract trouble." Clayton accepted this advice with a nod but no comment. By afternoon, they were making final preparations for their departure the next morning. Emma spent the evening packing her few belongings, her mind troubled. In 3, perhaps 4 days, they would reach San Francisco. She would begin her new life as a teacher, safely distant from her father's reach. And Clayton. Clayton would ride away, back to his solitary existence, moving from place to place, never staying long enough to put down roots. The thought filled her with a deep, aching sadness. Somewhere along their journey, Clayton Reed had become more than her protector or guide. He had become essential to her in a way no one ever had before. The prospect of saying goodbye to him in San Francisco seemed suddenly, acutely painful. A knock at her door interrupted these thoughts. She opened it to find Clayton standing there, his expression serious. "May I come in?" he asked. "There's something we need to discuss." Emma nodded, stepping back to allow him entry. Clayton remained standing just inside the door, his hat in his hands, turning it slowly as if gathering his thoughts. "I received a telegram today," he said finally, "from Connor." Something in his tone made Emma's heart skip. "Is everything all right at the ranch?" "Yes," Clayton assured her, "but there's news. Your father has hired Pinkerton detectives to find you." Emma sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly weak. "Pinkertons?" Clayton nodded grimly. They're thorough, professional, and nearly impossible to evade long-term. Connor says they've already been asking questions in town about you, about us. How did they find us so quickly? Emma asked, her mind racing. Jasper's telegram, most likely. And they'll have people watching all the major routes to California. Clayton's expression was grave. They'll be waiting in San Francisco, Emma. The full implications hit her. My father will never stop, will he? He'll find me no matter where I go. Clayton was quiet for a moment, considering. There might be another way, he said finally. A way to make him stop looking. What do you mean? Clayton took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for something difficult. If you were married, your father would no longer have legal control over you. Your husband would. Emma stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. Married, she repeated, but who would? She broke off as understanding dawned. You, Clayton met her gaze steadily. It would be a marriage in name only, he said quickly. I wouldn't expect anything. But it would give you legal protection. Once we reach San Francisco, you could still teach, live your life as you planned. I would make myself scarce. Emma couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the conflicting emotions his offer stirred. Gratitude for his willingness to sacrifice his freedom for her safety. Disappointment that he saw marriage to her as nothing more than a practical arrangement. And beneath it all, a realization that had been growing since that night beside the fire she had fallen in love with Clayton Reed. You don't have to answer now, Clayton said, misinterpreting her silence. It's just an option to consider. I know it's not ideal, yes. Emma interrupted. Clayton blinked. Yes, you'll consider it? Yes, I'll marry you, Emma clarified, her voice stronger than she expected. But not as a legal arrangement, Clayton, not if that's all it would be to you. Confusion crossed his face. I don't understand. Emma rose from the bed, crossing the room to stand before him. These past weeks, traveling with you, getting to know you, they've changed me. Changed how I see the world, how I see myself. She took a deep breath. How I see you. Clayton went very still, his eyes never leaving her face. I've spent my whole life being told what to feel, who to love, what to want, Emma continued. When I ran away, it was because I refused to marry a man I didn't love. I won't now marry a man who doesn't love me, even if that man is you. Emma, Clayton began, his voice rough with emotion. Let me finish, she said gently. I know you care for me, Clayton. I know you would protect me with your life, but I need to know, is there more? Could there be more between us than duty and protection? Clayton looked down at the hat in his hands, then back at her face. When he spoke, his voice was low and intense. From the moment I saw you in that saloon, something changed for me. I told myself I was just doing what any decent man would do, but that wasn't truth. The truth is. He paused, struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily to him. The truth is, I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you. Emma's heart soared, but she needed more. And what is that, Clayton? What do you feel? He set his hat aside and took her hands in his. I think I've been looking for you my whole life without knowing it. When I'm with you, the darkness that's followed me since the war, it recedes. For the first time in years, I can imagine a future that isn't just moving from place to place, always alone. He brought one hand up to cup her cheek, his touch infinitely gentle. I love you, Emma Whitfield. I think I've loved you since you stood up to Jasper in that saloon, chin raised and eyes flashing, refusing to go back to a life that would destroy you. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, spilling over onto her cheeks. I love you too, she whispered. So much that the thought of reaching San Francisco and saying goodbye has been breaking my heart. Clayton drew her closer, his forehead resting against hers. Then don't say goodbye, he murmured. Say you'll be my wife not just in name, but in truth. Say you'll come home with me to the ranch when this is over. Say you'll build a life with me. Yes, Emma breathed. Yes to all of it. When his lips met hers, it was like coming home to a place she'd never been before, unfamiliar yet perfectly right. His kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he couldn't quite believe this was happening. Then, as she responded, it deepened into something more passionate, a promise of all that could be between them. When they finally parted, both breathless, Clayton kept her close, his arms around her waist. "The judge is still in town," he said. "We could be married tomorrow before we leave." Emma nodded, happiness bubbling up inside her like a spring. "Tomorrow," she agreed. "And then San Francisco?" Clayton shook his head. "No need now. We can send a telegram to your cousin explaining the change in plans, then head back to the ranch. But the Pinkertons will be looking for Emma Whitfield, unmarried daughter of Harrison Whitfield," Clayton pointed out. "Not Emma Reed, wife of Clayton Reed." Emma smiled at the sound of her new name. "Emma Reed," she repeated, testing it on her tongue. "I like it." Clayton's answering smile was the most unguarded she had ever seen from him, transforming his face with joy. "We should tell Mrs. Fletcher," he said. "She'll want time to arrange a proper wedding breakfast. And we should send a telegram to Connor and Maria," Emma added. "They'll want to know we're coming home." Home, the word resonated in Emma's heart. After a lifetime of feeling untethered, she had found her place not in a location, but with a person. They were married the next morning in Pinecrest's small church, with Mrs. Fletcher and the town marshal as witnesses. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, the circuit judge officiating with surprisingly poetic words about the joining of two lives into one. Clayton had purchased a plain gold band from the town's general store, nothing fancy, but when he slipped it onto Emma's finger with hands that trembled slightly, it became the most precious thing she had ever owned. After a celebratory breakfast at the hotel, during which Mrs. Fletcher beamed like a proud mother, they prepared to depart. Their destination was no longer San Francisco, but Reed Ranch home. As they mounted their horses, Emma wearing the practical riding clothes Clayton had provided weeks earlier, now slightly worn from their journey, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. "Ready, Mrs. Reed?" Clayton asked, his blue eyes warm with love. Emma smiled at her husband, her heart full. "Ready, Mr. Reed." They rode out of Pinecrest side by side, heading east toward their future together. The path ahead would not always be smooth. There would be challenges to face, adjustments to make, perhaps even dangers to overcome. But Emma knew with bone-deep certainty that whatever came, they would face it together. 10 years later, Emma Reed stood on the porch of Reed Ranch, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and crimson. Behind her, the sounds of family filled the house, children's laughter, the clatter of dishes being cleared after dinner, the low murmur of adult conversation. A pair of strong arms encircled her waist, and she leaned back against her husband's chest, sighing contentedly. "Beautiful evening," Clayton observed, his chin resting on the top of her head. Emma agreed. "Perfect for stargazing later. I promised Sarah I'd show her the constellations." Their 8-year-old daughter had inherited her father's blue eyes and her mother's curiosity about everything. Their son, James, 6 and already determined to be a rancher like his father and uncle, had gone fishing with his cousins and Connor. "She's going to make a fine teacher someday," Clayton said proudly. "Just like her mother." Emma smiled at that. After settling at the ranch, she had eventually established a small school for the children of ranch hands and nearby homesteaders. What had begun with 5 students now served 20, with plans to build a proper schoolhouse next spring. "Did you see the letter that came today?" she asked. "From Boston." Clayton's arms tightened slightly around her. "Bad news," Emma shook her head. "My father is ill. The doctors don't expect him to recover." Clayton was quiet for a moment, respecting the complex emotions this news stirred in his wife. "Will you go to him?" Emma turned in his arms to face him. "We'll go together as a family. It's time Sarah and James met their grandfather, even if it's only once." Clayton nodded his understanding. Over the years, Emma had made peace with her past, if not with her father himself. Harrison Whitfield had never acknowledged her marriage, never responded to the birth announcements of his grandchildren, never shown any interest in reconciliation. But Emma had long since stopped allowing his rejection to define her. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you," Clayton assured her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Always." Emma studied her husband's face, still handsome at 43 though now lined by weather and time. The hardness that had once defined him had softened over the years, tempered by love and family, though he remained a man of quiet strength and unwavering principles. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The wandering, the freedom." Clayton smiled, the smile that even after 10 years could make her heart skip. "Not for a second," he said. "Everything I was looking for I found right here." He bent to kiss her, and Emma closed her eyes, savoring the familiar warmth of his lips against hers. When they had met in that dusty saloon a decade ago, she cornered and desperate. He, a stranger with a dangerous reputation, neither could have imagined the life they would build together. A home filled with love and laughter, children who grew strong in the security of their parents' devotion, a community that respected them both. "Mama, Papa, come quick," Sarah's voice called from inside the house. "Uncle Connor's back and he brought presents," Clayton chuckled against Emma's lips. "Duty calls, Mrs. Reed." "So it does, Mr. Reed," Emma agreed, taking his hand as they turned toward the warmth and light of their home. "So it does." As they stepped inside to join their family, Emma felt the same certainty that had filled her heart on their wedding day in Pinecrest. Whatever the future held, they would face it as they had faced the past decade together, their love a shelter stronger than any storm. In a saloon in Bitter Creek, a desperate woman had been cornered, and a quiet gunslinger had stepped in with 4 simple words that changed both their lives forever. "She's with me." Words that had begun as a stranger's protection and became a husband's promise. A vow renewed with every sunrise they shared, every challenge they faced, every moment of the life they had built from an unexpected beginning. She was with him and he with her, now and always.